to the place in the middle of the sun. And we'll sing this song, sing it one by one.
Hey guys.
What's going on? Thanks for tuning in. We have another great show for you today where we welcome Erwan and Alicia Davon, and they both share with us how to have a great relationship and be great parents, or I wanted to say how to have a great relationship and be parents.
I think we should strive for greatness.
Yeah. Or it's just a lot, it's a lot being a parent. And Erwan and Alicia give us some great tools to make sure we balance our parenting and relationship lives. And there's a lot in there. We could have a whole podcast series on, obviously, we have a whole podcast on improving your relationship, but especially if you are parents. So we really appreciate them coming on, sharing all their great advice, and a little bit about both of them. For the past 25 years, they have successfully taught over 12,000 singles and couples how to have exceptional relationships. And Erwan is the founder and senior teacher and president of the San Francisco-based Erwan Davon Teachings. And together with Alicia, they specialize in supporting singles in getting into passionate and successful relationships and helping couples take their relationships to new heights of romance and intimacy.
And they are also parents to Aiden, who is 5. So it was fun to connect with them from a relationship perspective as well as a parenting perspective. And one thing they said in the very beginning that I really haven't thought of before is when you're in a relationship, oftentimes the default is to focus on parenting as the priority. And if you almost switch that mindset, although it's so important, but to make sure that you always focus on your relationship first, it won't fall behind. So I think that is just something really powerful to think about and a good way to keep the relationship thriving, especially during the first couple of years of parenting. It's hard. So it was a great interview with them, and we hope you guys enjoyed today's show.
Today's episode is brought to you by our online course, Spark My Relationship.
Do you guys want to create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner in less than 90 days?
Yes, sign me up.
Then you guys need to check out our online course, Spark My Relationship. It is an online course, like I mentioned, that we created with over 15 therapists and psychologists to bring you guys the strategies marriage therapists teach their clients.
We talk about it on the show. Relationships take work. Sometimes they function pretty easily and you coast along, but we've found the reality is you have to do work sometimes and to make them better, to change them so that they're more satisfying for both partners.
And you've made it here. You've made it to listening to our show. So you guys probably already know that a little bit, but what you might not know are the specific tools and exercises that you need to create those lasting and positive improvements in your relationship. And like Chase said, change does not happen on its own. It takes hard work. And that's why we created the course.
Spark My Relationship is designed to infuse your life and relationship with fresh passion, skills, and wisdom. And it's a self-paced journey that's perfect for turning up the heat, having some fun together, and revolutionizing your intimacy and communication.
And just some tools and strategies that the course includes is to how to eliminate unhelpful old habits, develop mindful awareness to help improve your stress management, learn healthy and successful communication tools, create a deeper and more intimate bond, and strengthen your couple microculture, which you will find out what that is, in the future together. So for our listeners only, we're offering a special of $100 off the course. Visit sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock to unlock your discount. And there is a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there really is no reason to not give it a try. So go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock for $100 off. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Erwan. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, we're excited.
Today, we are going to dive in and talk about how to balance being a parent and having a great relationship. And we in the pre-show, we said how to be a great parent and have a great relationship, but those just seem like super high expectations to do both of those. But we want to try. So today we're going to dive into that topic. So we are more than happy to have our guests share personal stories. We talk a little bit about the fact that you guys have a 5-year-old. Maybe if you're okay with it, you could share how you navigate your relationship and being parents.
It's a great question. And just, to sort of cut to the chase. Sorry, that's my sense of humor. But the bottom line, I'll say it that way. The bottom line, for us is parenting. Really, what we've noticed with our students is that parenting tends to dominate. When a couple has kids, the child needs to survive, and the children take up a ton of energy and time, and parents, however well or badly they do as parents, they just love their children, and so it just kind of dominates. So, and then often the relationship falls to the side. So the bottom line for us is really to prioritize the relationship as the romantic relationship between the adults. Sacrilegious as that might sound, just because the skew is in the other direction so strongly. And our experience is that really helps the child, because then the child has modeled for them a great romantic relationship between the adults.
The other day, Aiden, our son, and I were hanging out in the living room, and Erwan came upstairs. He had been coaching somebody downstairs in our coaching space. He came up, and Erwan came over to me, and we hugged and kissed hello. And I looked over and saw Aiden's big eyes. He's got these big hazel eyes, like looking up at us and smiling. And it was this vibe of like comfort and happiness, seeing the relationship between Erwan and me.
One of the things you mentioned is prioritizing the relationship. And I remember, I think it was like 3 years in or 2 years into Stella's life. Stella was like 2 or 3 and maybe older. And Sarah and I were like, we haven't been away from Stella for
ever. Right?
Yeah. Well, we had been individually, but
not together.
Yeah. I think she was maybe 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in 4 years, and we love being with her. So don't get me wrong, but it was like we had kind of lost ourselves in parenting because there's a lot there, and hadn't taken the time for ourselves, like an extended weekend, which I think we ended up doing.
That's great. That's great. And I think one thing that kind of allows parents to do that is when they realize, oh, this is good for the child. This is healthy for the child, where the parent-child relationship is primary and the relationship between the adults is secondary. There's actually something distorted about that. And, we both have degrees in psychology, and it goes into, it can get into very, very distorted patterns. My childhood was, to put it succinctly, a nightmare. My parents came over from France. They were breaking up. I was 2 years old. It was a terrible, terrible divorce. I ended up staying with the state of New York for a while, then bouncing back between our houses. I don't have any memories of them, et cetera, et cetera. My mother split when I was 7. And, so what I experienced really was I had these individual relationships with each of them. I had a very, very extreme negative case of what we were just talking about. But the silver lining in all that difficulty early on was that, sometimes you kind of learn things by extremes. It really forced me to look at relationships and people and study psychology. I was in psychoanalysis at 15 years old, eventually came out to California, did every woo-woo rebirthing thing I could possibly do. Lived in a yoga monastery, a Zen ashram, the whole bit. But it really turned out well to go through all of those difficulties. And that was one of the biggest takeaways is it's very important for the parents' relationship to be in good shape. That's what's actually great for the child.
What's the first step that a couple can take to transition it from being a parenting first relationship to focusing on themselves? Do you have any specific tools they can do to implement in the relationship?
Well, the first thing, which is very, very important, is to acknowledge what's happening, like actually say it. Because what can happen with couples is the child and the relationship with the child gets prioritized and then nobody's really talking about it. Or maybe one person's thinking about it and upset about it, but not talking about it. So you literally want to take your partner by the hand, when your kid is in bed or at preschool or at school or whatever, walk them over to the couch, sit down and say, hey, I want to be more connected. I notice that we're putting a lot of attention on our child and not as much on our relationship. I want more. Let's talk about it.
And especially doing that around things like sex, usually after people get married and then also after, for some reason, 7 years, for some people 1 year or 7 years, or, after people have kids, the sex drops down. So doing what Alicia said, having that kind of come to Jesus conversation about the relationship about sex is a good idea. That's a great concrete thing. And then another concrete thing is to schedule time together. It sounds, I don't know, it sounds mundane or something, but it's really important. Have a date night. We have multiple times per week where we go out and we socialize. We have multiple times per week where we do inquiry together. We sit down. Psychological inquiry is a technique we use. We have our students do it daily, and we do it with each other several times a week. So to actually submit one's schedule to what is really important, which in this case is the relationship.
Can you share a little bit what the inquiry looks like? Some of the questions?
Yes. So here's what it looks like. So Erwan and I, for example, it's 9:15 at night, a few times a week, we have this in our calendar, we're hanging out in our bedroom and we pick a topic. So a topic could be, sometimes like our most recent topic was like, what are the things that get in the way of us prioritizing deeply connecting? What gets in the way for us? Then we each take a turn and we set our timer on our iPhone for 10 minutes each. And when it's my 10 minutes, I just kind of share whatever comes to mind. Like, wow, I noticed I got really distracted today by this work project. And there was that moment you were in the living room and I could have just sat down with you and chatted, but I got distracted. And wow, I noticed I feel a little sad about that. And, just exploring my own experience with no interruption for 10 minutes. Then Erwan goes for 10 minutes.
Now, the timer really, really helps because otherwise it can turn in, if it's like a therapist is trained to really listen, that's what they're trained in the most. But when couples talk, they often get really triggered by each other. It activates some psychological issue. We call it a person's relationship blueprint. So the timer really, really helps, and it really, really supports the listening to the other person. And then as Alicia was sharing that, the topic that is one of our favorites, it's a great one, is what I appreciate about you. And you just spend 10 minutes saying what you appreciate about the other person. It really sort of opens up the airwaves.
So what do you do as a listener when your partner says something that you don't like and it's bringing up defensive feelings? In the moment, what can you do? And then let's say your partner says something that's just not true, or maybe they read it wrong. There was a miscommunication. How do you address that or not at the end of the 10 minutes?
The one quick thing I'll say is there's a rule, which is, since the other person has to just listen, there's no blaming or coming to conclude, if you're going to really like have more of a conversation, like say some things you don't like about the other person or blaming or this or that's better handled in a conversation. Psychological inquiry is kind of more about what's going on for me. So if I'm feeling angry or something like that, or scared or something, I would talk about my anger, my fear, as opposed to you did this or you did that.
That makes sense. So, but can they be, if you're fearful about something in the relationship, can you share that? Just not being blaming?
Absolutely. It's a time to share your own experience, which is different from, telling the other person how they need to be, or that you're so mad at them because they did something bad, right? It's a very positive experience because you're taking the time to explore your own experience. And the listener can know that this is about the other person talking. And when it's their turn, they can talk. We had and I'll give you an example because I can see what you're getting at. A few weeks ago, we had some kind of difficulty during the day, and I can't remember the details, but then we had our inquiry that night. And I remember going into it feeling like, oh gosh, I'm mad. I hope this doesn't turn into a fight. And we set the timer. I did my 10 minutes. Erwan did his 10 minutes, and you kind of feel in the space we're sitting there and there was tension. And I said something like, I want to respond to something that you said. And I'm not sure how, because we just did this inquiry. And then we ended up setting the timer for 5 minutes each, back and forth until we each said everything we wanted to say. And we weren't allowed to interrupt. But we could respond to what the other person said. And it worked it out.
Yeah, it worked.
It was novel. We made it up in the moment. We're like, okay, we're straying from the usual inquiry, but we got to get some things off our chest.
Yeah, it really forces one to listen. A great relationship is really all about listening to the other person. What this makes me think of, Sarah and Chase, is one thing like a not to do that parents do sometimes is, we're working with a couple and this is a real problem for them, is if they get triggered by their partner, they'll often talk to the child about it, or whether it's directly or indirectly, even just kind of like send some negative energy about the other parent to the child, and that's a really strict no. There's basically no circumstance. We could probably come up with some kind of extreme circumstance, but there's basically no circumstance to involve the child in anything negative going on between the parents, unless it's, just if you've had difficulty, you can say, we had an argument, it happens, but you never badmouth the other parent to the child.
Kids obviously are like little sponges, and certainly badmouthing directly, but even I've noticed with Stella in the past, like tone is super important if you're talking with your partner in front of the kids, that, like you want to be friendly. And of course, we're going to have issues in relationships, but that maybe instead of being like, hey, let's talk about this another time, it's like, hey, can we talk about this later? I think that would be best. And because I've seen Stella's eyes and kind of perk up, or she's listening. And I don't want that negative energy being modeled for her.
And even with tone, because with Stella, we've noticed that she'll pick up on a little bit of an attitude. And sometimes I catch her, say things not the kindest way. And it makes me realize, well, she must be getting that from somewhere. So it makes me want to be even more cautious of the tone that I have when I'm talking with Chase.
It's so important. A few weeks ago, there's such a beautiful example I'm remembering now. It's moving to me even now, like weeks later. So it was a Sunday, and Erwan and I were hanging out in the kitchen, and Aiden was in the living room, and he was playing with something, and we were talking about something. And at some point, we were kind of butting heads, and it was okay. But then the tension started to rise a little bit, and we're like, okay, we have a commitment not to, have a big argument in front of Aiden and that kind of thing. So we said, hey, to Aiden, we need to work this out now. So we're like, baby, mommy and daddy are going to have a conversation. Why don't you go in your room? We're going to be done in 10 minutes. We're going to set you up with something to play with. We need to talk about something now. And, he was not thrilled about it, but he cooperated, went into his room. He was playing. We had closed the door, and Erwan and I talked about whatever we needed to talk about and got it to a place of good. And then we looked over down the hall, and Aiden's door was open, a crack. And we're like, oh my gosh, he opened his door to listen. So we go over to his room and we're like, hey, did you hear a conversation? And he looked sort of like mysterious or not mysterious, mischievous. And he smiled. And then Erwan's like, I'll handle this. So he goes and sits down with Aiden, and I walked away, and I overhear Aiden say, Daddy, what happened? Did Mama do something wrong? I hear this, and I'm like, ooh, how's he going to answer this? And I creep over to the room of eavesdropping, right? I'm like the master eavesdropper. And Erwan said, oh no, baby, Mama did nothing wrong. Like neither of us did anything wrong. I got disappointed by something, and I felt mad and sad, and we talked about it. And I was like crying in the hallway. I'm like, this is so beautiful. It's just good to, and it was honest what he said, right? It was maybe he had more tension when he and I were talking about it, but it was just, it's worth it to take the time to tell the truth, but in a responsible way to our kids.
But before we continue on, we're going to tell you about today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp.
Nowadays, it is definitely okay to talk about our mental health and happiness. We are not meant to keep everything inside, and therapy truly helps. But what is therapy exactly? Well, it is whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're struggling in your relationship, or maybe you are super happy, but you want to be proactive in your relationship and look for some tools that might help you in the future. Or maybe you just feel overwhelmed with life and need someone to talk to. Whatever you need, don't be ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better today, because you deserve to feel happy.
And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours.
Join the millions of people who are seeing what therapy is really all about. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/ido. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/ido. Today's episode is also brought to you by Bev. Bev is a female-first canned wine brand that has 0 sugar, 3 carbs, and only 100 calories per serving. When I was back in Florida a few weeks ago, I was able to try Bev for the first time, and I was very impressed. I was getting a little bored of drinking the same hard seltzers, so the fact that Bev is in a can just made my pool days even better. Bev has 5 varietals: Rosé, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, and a sparkling white wine. I, of course, tried them all, but my favorite was the Sauvignon Blanc. It's fruity yet dry with a hint of crisp green apple and light fresh citrus, and it even has a little fizz in it too. It's super refreshing and definitely going to be my go-to drink this summer. And the best thing about it being in a can is it's perfect for the pool, it's easy to transport to the beach or for a drink at the park, and you don't need to always remember to bring the wine opener that I always forget. Each can is a glass and a half of wine, which for me is perfect. I always feel like 1 glass is not enough, and then 2 is always a little too much, so it's the perfect amount. And then I don't have to open a whole bottle, which usually goes to waste. Bev ships straight to your door, and shipping is always free. We've worked out an exclusive deal for our listeners where you'll receive 20% off your first purchase, plus free shipping on all orders. In addition to my favorite, the Sauvignon Blanc, I highly recommend their newest sparkling rosé, Bev Glam, or try their best-selling Ladies Night Variety Pack for all of their refreshing varietals. Go to drinkbev.com/ido or use the code IDO at checkout to claim this deal. That's drinkbev, drinkbev.com/ido. drinkbev.com/ido.
Love that, how you communicate with your kid like an adult, obviously, but like tell them what's going on and not like, hey, go to your room and just play with your toys while we talk, because that's going to set them up with the tools and the understanding, hopefully, to be able to navigate communication in the relationships they have with their parents, and then eventually friends, family, and a partner themselves.
Exactly. It really comes down to the truth. The relationship is only as good as the communication, and the communication is only as good as the truth. And kids can handle the truth if it's delivered, well, if it's delivered in a language they can understand. It makes me think of Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, you might remember, I don't know if you guys are probably a little younger than us, but from way back when, he dealt with very difficult topics. He dealt with death. He dealt with divorce. He dealt with all kinds of stuff. But he was a minister, actually, and he was really good at speaking in a language that children could digest, but he never compromised the truth. And that's really been the secret of our relationship, has been, we like to say we have a perfect relationship, and it's not because there's no issues or no problems, or we never fight or anything like that. It's more from all of the meditation and the yoga and so on. There's just space for everything. So everything gets to be saturated by space, by love, by consciousness. And then the experience is perfection, not perfection like it's all shiny like some Hollywood movie or something like that. But this is life. Life is awesome. And to really have the relationship between each other and the relationship parent to child be deep, be profound, be awake, be truthful.
We talked a little bit in the pre-show about masculine and feminine in the relationship. And I'm just thinking out loud here as we talk about this with parenting, but how in a relationship roles change when a child comes along. Now your girlfriend or your wife becomes a mother, and the other partner a father, or two mothers or two fathers, whatever the situation. But it kind of throws the roles and for a loop, right? Like everything is so new and different, both in the relationship and individually. Like it's so weird to me that I'm a dad and so is almost 6. But can we talk a little bit about that and how that might affect the relationship?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely added responsibility. There's, different roles, but, people have different skill sets, whoever the masculine person is, whoever the feminine person is, whether it's a man and a woman or two women or two men, for it to be a romantic relationship, there has to be some polarity. There has to be some difference. If there's not difference, it can be a great relationship, but it's not a romantic relationship. And so it's good for people to do what they want to do and what they kind of specialize in. We find it doesn't need to be the kind of sort of, the rigid kind of lockdown stereotype male-female thing from the 1950s is kind of a disaster. The woke thing nowadays, where it's, it's funny because it's kind of anti-diversity in the name of diversity. Nobody gets the sort of, like the masculine and the feminine, I think, are both kind of crushed in that modern movement. But it's very important to actually have the roles, what a person is, not what's prescribed, because you're a male or a female or this or that, but like, what do you want to do? What are you good at? What do you, like Alicia's great with Aiden in some ways that like, I can't even begin to do that. And then there's a few things I do with him that, that are, sort of more in my wheelhouse.
Oh my God. The patience to put together a, 500 piece Lego dinosaur thing, or that they build these huge things. And then Aiden will be like, Mama, when Erwan's not around, like, hey, will you build this with me? I'm like, oh God. Yeah. And I just end up kind of sitting there with him and handing him pieces as he needs them. But it's really sweet because when Erwan and Aiden the other day were building this huge dinosaur out of Legos, I could see Erwan's skill at like supporting him learning how to build. He's like, oh, look at this picture and look at this piece. And does it go this way or that way? He's not doing it for him, but he's with him every step of the way. And I'm just like, this is good. Not my skill set.
And if he's upset, kids get upset. It's, Alicia's really good at, just kind of receiving it and being with him and calming him down and that kind of thing. And then, then there's a certain level of upset where, it's not good for him to be that upset. So I can just go in and like, just stop that, bring some strong energy, and he'll just stop. So, there's ways that, since we're talking about masculine, feminine dynamics, there's ways that the feminine is more advanced and stronger and has different capabilities. There's all kinds of brain differences and body differences and expertise in certain areas. And same thing for folks who are more masculine in parenting. And then, of course, in romance, a feminine person typically would rather receive the flowers. A masculine person typically would rather bring the flowers. And, it could be a woman or a man or however people like to do it. The woman who officiated our wedding actually has a very interesting relationship dynamic. Her husband became transgender and became a woman. But what's interesting is they still really have the roles. So it's still a polarized relationship. There's still difference between the two. It's not this kind of homogenous mix where, feminine appeal and attractiveness and all that is kind of like squashed, and masculine, ability to move furniture, is squashed. Boy, if you get us started on this masculine feminine thing, it's kind of a fun conversation, but I'll leave it there for now.
No, it's important to understand. And I'm thinking we had an interview the other day where we were talking about biological changes. I think it was through aging, but certainly the men and women, when a child comes along, more so the woman, there's a lot of biological changes to the hormones. And I read, men's testosterone tends to drop when a child comes along, and then women's sex drive can go down. So it's just another recognition of how things are changing a lot. Obviously, there's a new human in the house, and you have to watch what you say. You don't want to argue in front of them, all those things. You don't have time to have date nights like you used to. Just really recognizing that. And then also biologically, all the changes. So it's just thinking of my own experience in the moment. I didn't really realize it too much. I was just like, all right, yeah, there's a kid. But then as time went on with a little bit, you're just trying to keep the thing alive. and then
the thing.
I'm joking. I can do more than move furniture.
I know.
But that you get caught up in it, and then the relationship changes or takes a back seat. So really just being aware of all these things can be super valuable.
It's the awareness is so important. We both, and I in particular, would work with a lot of parents and parents of young kids. And the thing happens, right? The child comes along, and then everybody's tired, and the time constraints are different. And then you think, okay, well, we haven't had romance or intimacy or sex we're just tired. That's it. We're just tired, not in the mood. But if you actually inquire, there's other layers of things going on for people. For example, you mentioned the biological changes, the hormonal changes in the woman's body, the focus on the child and needing to keep the child alive. And then there's also some interesting things that can happen psychologically that I noticed with myself a little bit, like in a lot of moms I talk to, where there's this sense like, oh, my body is for the child, and I can't be a mom and a sexual lover for my partner at the same time. There's like this interesting, often unconscious conflict. And, we're often not aware of the conflict. So all we think is like, I can't, I'm not in the mood, don't want to do it. But inquiring into that. And another thing that can happen when a family unit is formed, right? Which people can have families without children, but when a child is born, our unconscious familial conditioning can kind of like seep into the situation. And often the environments we were raised in, didn't have a lot of, adult kind of romance happening. Like very few people say, oh, my parents had a really active romantic and sex life. Most of us are like, what? My parents didn't have sex. So we kind of like, it seeps in like, oh, if you're a parent, you don't have sex. Like I was working with this great couple. They have a 2-year-old. And she was like, her big goal in the coaching is I want to find my turn on again. I want us to have good sex again. And one thing she realized was that she had this belief like moms don't have sex. Moms are not sexy because that's what she grew up with. So becoming aware of all of that is really important. So then you have a choice, right? You can like, oh, okay, there's that. And we can practice some skills. We can develop some skills to bring that yummy feeling back between us.
To give you an example of the skills, we have a set of touching practices we have our student couples do, parents or not. Just imagine one person sitting upright on the bed, kind of cross-legged, the other person laying down in front of them, one hand on the person who's sitting up puts one hand on their partner's heart, the other hand on their partner's abdomen. The partner who's laying down is just kind of receiving that. Maybe there's some new age music on, some incense, that kind of thing. Very basic touching practice. We have our students do that who are in couples daily. Then another practice we add into that is kind of like moving the hands around and feeling. Then it gets more sensual with what we call a taking touch, which typically is much slower and lighter, the way you would pet a cat, for example, to really receive the pleasure in your hands slowly, kind of like that. And it goes all the way to a more explicit sexual practice. And because to go from little sex or no sex or decrease in sex to sex, is a huge leap. And, it's very, very confronting for people. It triggers all kinds of things, like Alicia was talking about, it triggers all kinds of things for parents in particular. So to have kind of a sort of step-by-step practice that doesn't need to lead to intercourse. Maybe it just stays at deep touch, or maybe it goes to that lighter kind of touch or taking touch or some kind of stroking or something like that. And it gives the couples, instead of going into a restaurant and only having one item on the menu, it's like all of a sudden romance and sex and so on. It's a, very broad, and there's time for it. You can do this and you can do that. And there's like, and then that energy, that polarity really starts to move. And when a couple builds that into their day, and it really does require building that into their day, because, some time is going to get sacrificed from Netflix or work or whatever, it really changes that dynamic. And typically, in our experience, the woman in the relationship really wants that, but we find women tend to order short. They have all this appetite, for a lot of things, including sex. But it's, you want to say anything about this? Like when we started going out, I noticed we go out to a restaurant and, we go to a fancy restaurant, and like I noticed after the third one, Alicia's always ordering the chicken. And I'm like, why are you always ordering the chicken? I know you want the lobster. I mean, if you don't want the lobster, tell me, but like, you always want so women often want the lobster, but they're ordering the chicken. And that's part of what we call the female decoder ring. And for parents, it's particularly important for the guy to get his attention back on the woman.
Well, to clue into the fact that for a variety of psychological reasons and cultural reasons, women tend to ask for less than what they really want. We call that ordering short, right? She wants the lobster, but she orders the chicken. She says, oh, I want, a little more intimacy in our relationship. But actually what she would really like is a lot more intimacy and different types of positions and lots of time spent doing it. And, we tend to order short. The bottom line of why is self-doubt, right? Fear of being too much and self-doubt, which are very common psychological issues with women. But, if a guy or the masculine in the relationship kind of knows that, like, okay, women, including my woman, tends to order short, then he can over-deliver and actually give her what she wants.
That would make a new mom super happy, I'm sure. So that's good advice. We could obviously spend many episodes talking about masculine and feminine and how it relates to being parents and being great parents in a great relationship. But you've given us some really great tools to start with and different things to think about, guys. So we appreciate you coming on and sharing. Before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners where they can find you online and if there's anything we skipped over or maybe you want to emphasize, and then we'll say goodbye?
I just want to say it's been great talking to both of you. Both of you are just super charming, and we've had a really, really good time talking to you.
Yes, agreed. And for those of you that are listening and are interested in learning more about working with Erwan and me, what I recommend is contacting us to set up a free love life consultation. So what that is, it's a private conversation with me. We'll get personal. You can talk to me about your relationship life, about your parenting life, your goals, your challenges, and I'll work with you to find some solutions. And if it looks like Erwan and I can support you further, I'll lay out the different options that we have to work with us. Our most popular program is called Mastery of Relationship. And it's a weekly online community coaching class. We've got private coaching and weekend intensives and affiliate programs and work trade and all sorts of stuff. So during the Love Life consultation, we'll go over all of that. Now, I want to say the Love Life consultation, it's not just for parents. Some of you might just have romantic goals. And the way to set up the Love Life consultation is to text our school. The number is 415-308-9580. I'll say it again, 415-308-9580. I'll also give you guys, Sarah and Chase, a link. People can just click it to set up this consultation. And anybody who sets up the consultation, I'll also include a video. You were asking about psychological inquiry and how it goes. We have a video that lays out how to do it. So I'll send that to anybody who wants one along with their text.
Wonderful. Well, it was a pleasure having the two of you on the show. We'll have the links to the Love Life consultation and your contact information on the show notes and in the podcast description. And we greatly appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, great to be with you guys. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show, guys. As always, the links will be in the podcast description as well as on the show notes on our website at idopodcast.com. And while you're on our website, we hope you guys check out our free 14-day Happy Couple Challenge. It's a challenge where we send you a daily email for 14 days with easy, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And it's honestly, just a whole lot of fun to do with your partner. It's something new, and we think you guys will really enjoy it. So check it out. And while you're on the website, there are tons of free resources, as well as more information about our online course, Spark My Relationship, where our listeners can get $100 off. So check that out. You can go directly to the course website at sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. And that's where you can get the $100 off. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.